you, everyone, and thank you, Tim. Welcome to the webinar, and good evening. It's my pleasure to introduce our webinar presenter, Dr. Mary Evelyn Tucker. Mary Evelyn is one of the world's leading scholars and most prolific writers in the field of religion and ecology. She's published a trove of articles and co-authored and edited many, many books. And among these, a collaboration with Brian Swim entitled Journey of the Universe, which evolved into an Emmy award-winning film by the same title. And I think many of us have actually viewed that film and enjoyed it very much. Mary Evelyn has been a student and collaborator of Thomas Berry, recently authoring Thomas Berry, a biography, published by Columbia University Press last June. We highly recommend it. It's a wonderful story. And she remains a deeply committed steward to Thomas Berry's legacy. Along with her husband, John Grimm, Mary Evelyn is co-director of the Yale University Forum on Religion and Ecology. In our post-webinar communications, we're going to be forwarding to everyone links to the website for the Yale Forum on Religion and Ecology, which holds many resources and more information on the newest initiative with the United Nations Environmental Program. I think I can speak for all of us when I personally and collectively on your behalf express to Mary Evelyn our profound gratitude for her dedication, her work, and the way she has awakened and nurtured in all of us a faith that serves the integrity and flourishing of Earth. What a contribution. It's my pleasure to welcome Mary Evelyn Tucker to our SSND webinar on the 5th anniversary of Laudato Si. Welcome, Mary Evelyn.
Thank you so much, Arlene and Tim, and what a great privilege and honor, truly, to be with you all, even in this virtual form. We're being adaptable, and I'm just thrilled to be able to touch base with you, and I know I'll learn from this experience as well. And I should say, when I taught at a college in Japan of the Notre Dame de Namur sisters, I was also in touch with some of the SSND sisters in Japan. So I feel a long time ago, I knew a little bit about your order. That was 73, 74. And so I'm delighted to be here with you and sharing some thoughts. And I'd love to begin actually with just the notion that when I was young, I used to say to my mother, you know, if we have an encyclical from a pope who's believable, credible on the environment, we will have a real chance for the flourishing of the Earth community. And I've held this in my heart for a long, long time. And I remembered in 2015, I was actually coming back from China when it was published officially in June, and I was reading madly on the plane and rereading it and so on, and just so thrilled, so moved by it all. And I've reread it many times. I'm sure some of you have as well. So this is an exciting moment 5 years later from when it was officially announced. And I know there's all kinds of seminars next week. I'll participate in one on May 19th. But I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, I think this is a document that can be read and reread, and it fires us up. You know, Teilhard was all about the zest for life and what would fire us up, even in the midst of sorrow, of death, and destruction, which we are feeling deeply right now. You know, Teilhard's vision came out of being a stretcher bearer in World War I, in the most intense warfare, trench warfare that the world had ever seen. And yet, in the midst of that suffering and death and ministry, he had a vision of something emerging, of this huge, deep sense of time and an Earth community, I would say. So these are things that sustain me, and I just wanted to share that. This is the joy of Laudato Si is also deeply aware of suffering and diminishment that we all know, and especially in these times. So I want to begin with a few words about when it was released. So I'm going to go through a little bit of the history and the background and some what it's addressing as a problem and the solution. So that's kind of the outline here. A little of the history, a little of the background, the problems and solutions. Many of you will be familiar, I think, with what I'm saying, and I just hope it's helpful for your thinking through next week and into the future. So when this was actually released in the Pontifical Academy of Science, one of the great scientific centers in the world, Galileo founded it and so on. So it's several hundred years old. You know, the Pope wasn't there, which is very interesting. The Pope wasn't there because it wasn't about him. It was about the ideas offered to the world. So who did he ask to be his representatives in that room? And I've been in that room, and it's not a large room, actually, but the people who were presiding there were, as you probably know, Cardinal Turkson, who's from Ghana, so representing a closeness to the Pope, but also representing the developing world, the third world, all the different worlds we use for it. But that was the representative from the Vatican, officially, Cardinal Turkson. And he's a wonderful person, great sense of humor, and so on. The other person who was there representing ecumenical dialogue was a representative from the Greek Orthodox Patriarch Bartholomew, who's head of the Orthodox Church. And his key theologian, Metropolitan John of Pergamon, who we've met and is an amazing person, deeply spiritual, profoundly mystical. And he was there representing this close collegiality that the Pope has had with the Greek Orthodox Patriarch Bartholomew, who says, he speaks of the earth as icon, the profound light coming through the earth. He talks about what we're doing as crimes against creation and ecological sin. And he's been doing that. And we've been following him at many of his seminars since 1997. So that ecumenical and interreligious presence of the theologian John of Pergamon was the second key person. And the third was a scientist, because this encyclical begins with and is based on science. A tremendous move by the Pope in that regard. So the head of the Potsdam Institute for Climate Change, the largest in the world, over 200 scientists based in Germany, the head of that at the time, John Schulneberger, was there. He happens to be Catholic, and he was a key partner in writing the encyclical and giving the scientific data. So here we have a third world cardinal, we have an ecumenical theologian, and we have a scientist. Amazing, a watershed. So that sensibility is what goes through this encyclical in so many ways. I could talk about that for quite some time. Then let me just touch on a little bit of the background of this. Many, many people contributed to it, as I'm sure you know, but I want to just hold up one particular theme and phrase, and that is cry of the earth, cry of the poor, which is repeated over and over again. And it's a beautiful phrase. That comes from Leonardo Boff, who is, as you know, a leading liberation theologian from Brazil. And many decades ago, Thomas Berry said to Leonardo, you can't free and liberate people without ecology, without healthy earth systems. And that's, of course, what we're seeing right now. Planetary health and human health are deeply linked. And Berry used to say there are no healthy people on a sick planet. That's what we're feeling right now. And that's what the Pope understands powerfully. So Leonardo wrote this book in 97 called Cry of the Earth, Cry of the Poor. It's in a series that we've edited for 20 plus years at Orbis Books. I recommend it highly. Leonardo understands Berry, he understands universe story, and he understands this integration of integral ecology, which again was actually a term that Thomas Berry came up many years ago. It's central to the encyclical. What does that mean? It means a lot of things, but I would say the essence of it is bringing together people and planet. In this way, the phrase does, cry of the earth, cry of the poor. Now, why is that so important? For so many reasons. We can say that our Catholic tradition and many of the Christian and other Abrahamic traditions have had a strong sense of social justice. Many of you have worked with the poor. Many of you have seen things that are absolutely heart-wrenching. We're seeing it right now. The homeless, people in line for food, and so on. It's heartbreaking. It's hard to sleep looking at these pictures. So the enormous sense of compassion for people, and especially the vulnerable and the poor, has been very strong in our tradition. The environment has, until more recently, not been quite as strong for a variety of reasons. I see this at our school at Yale, the environment school, 110 years old, strong on the environment, but doesn't really understand the people side as well. The divinity school, social justice, but doesn't understand the environment. What the Pope has done is bringing together, as never before, the ecological sensibility, ecological integrity of ecosystems, health of ecosystems, and the health and well-being of people. That's what integral ecology is together. People and planet. It's magnificent because he does this with eloquent language and powerful moral force. And I can tell you, people on the environmental side, Bill McKibben, who's a friend, says this is the most important document of the 21st century because of what he's doing, people and planet. A great writer and thinker in India, Amitav Ghosh, came to Yale and he did a book called The Great Disruption. At the end of it, he says this is one of the most important literary texts of the 21st century. So I want to just say that many people are responding to this. Certainly Catholics and Christians have. On our website that has a section on Laudato Si, there are statements from all the world's religions why this is such an important document. Now, I've given you a sense it's important because of integral ecology, but let me spell that out a little bit more. So what the Pope has done ingeniously is bringing together 3 points: ecology, economics, and equity. The 3 E's, I like to say. I've said already, ecological health, integrity of ecosystems, but economics, he has a tremendous critique, as you know, I think, of capitalism, of free market capitalism that is letting so many people fall through the cracks. The homeless people, people in Flint, Michigan, our inner city people, it goes on and on and on. So he has a strong critique of economics and equity. We know in the US and elsewhere, the tremendous, again, heartbreaking disparities between the very wealthy and those who do not even have savings of $400. And as I understand it, 50% of our society is in that edge, if not more. So equity is hugely important. Now, let me underscore something that I'm sure many of you have worked with over the years, and that is the Earth Charter that came out 20 years ago. And that's mentioned in the encyclical in a footnote. And the encyclical matches this ecology, economics, and equity because the Earth Charter says 3 big parts. Ecological integrity must be preserved. Social economic justice needs to come forward. And democracy, nonviolence, and peace. These are the 3: ecology, justice, and peace, the 3 parts of the Earth Charter. So you can see how that also went into and influenced the encyclical. Now, I think the final point I want to say in this introduction is all of this is a broadening of the sense of the Earth community. We realize more and more we don't just belong to our family or our bioregion or our state, our nation, our continent, but we're part of this vast emerging Earth community. And for the first time in human history, we are in touch as never before. I spent 2 years in Japan teaching at this Notre Dame de Namur college. I only talked home to my family once when my brother got married. Even before that, I spent a year in England, in Oxford, and just one phone call home at Christmas time, and it was the cable under the Atlantic Ocean, and the connection broke. Think of the world we're living in now. So this tremendous sense of Earth community, which has its struggles as it's emerging, has its conflicts, but it also has its potential for creative and expanding compassion. So that's the vision of Laudato Si. And I just want to share, before going to the next section, here at Yale, we were amazed when our dean of the School of the Environment, Peter Crane, who's a marvelous and very intense scientist, he said to us all during that year, 2014, 2015, Mary Evelyn, John, when is the encyclical coming out? This was amazing to me because this is a very secular school, and we've been in secular academia our whole life. It's very difficult, I can tell you, because they don't understand spirituality, they don't understand religion, they kind of want to reject it. And here is our dean saying, when's it going to come out? And when we finally realized it wasn't going to come out till June of that year after classes were already done, he said, we must have a session at Yale on the encyclical in April before classes end. And so we did. And it was an amazing panel. You can watch it on our website and so on. But that's also, so I've said the religious communities have come on board, writers have come on board, environmentalists, but scientists are very excited, some of them, by this encyclical because they see its power to activate the consciousness and conscience of people around eco-justice and a flourishing Earth community. Now, let me say then, and I'll just do 3 more points and then we can have some discussion. I want to just discuss the problems that the Pope is identifying and the solutions. And this would take a long time to identify all the problems that he's noting and even all the solutions. But in its simplest forms, he is critiquing scientism. As I just said, science that is reductionistic and just sees the Earth as something to examine empirically and try and understand doesn't see what Teilhard saw, that spirit and matter, this is a divine milieu. This is a sacred universe that we're part of. So the scientists in a reductionist model just see it as dead matter, animals not having consciousness, so you can experiment on them, and so on and so forth. So scientism and reductionism is what the Pope is identifying as a problem. Then he also identifies economism, which would be a market economy with no limits to growth, and it doesn't matter who falls to the bottom and who rises to the top. So a market-based capitalist system, he is saying, is not serving the planet and its future well. That is a remarkable and important critique. He also critiques progress without limits. You know, we in the West have said, oh, more and more in the future is going to be better and better. And we had the notion of the frontier and expansion in this country. And a Yale professor has just won the Pulitzer Prize for nonfiction by saying that idea of limitless expansion and progress is a false myth. And this is what Thomas Berry was trying to say. Our American dream, based on progress, based on more, based on acquisition and consumerism, is failing us. And that's why he said we need a new dream, a dream of the earth. And that's the story of the whole universe. So these are the problems that the Pope identifies: scientism, economism, progress without limits. Now, what are the solutions? So he's saying, a new ethics and a new worldview, a new consciousness, a new worldview, and a new conscience coming into being. The ethics we've touched on is eco-justice, coming together to think about those most vulnerable to climate change, to pollution, to instability of the melting ice caps and rising seas, and so on. So the solutions then, in terms of new worldviews, in coming back to integral ecology, is a broader context for responding to these problems. And this is where, this is where the worldview of Teilhard and Thomas Berry and Brian Swim and Journey of the Universe is in this encyclical, not because of us, it's there because of the Pope's magnificent understanding of the universe. So the Teilhardian view is that we are living within a divine milieu. We have a hymn to the universe in our hearts as we're in this spring season and we see renewal and plants and flowers coming forward. And that is what the Pope is putting before us, the beauty and complexity of the earth and its systems. So he uses the hymn, the Canticle of the Sun of St. Francis of Assisi. He is the first pope, of course, to go back to Francis as an inspiration. Now, Francis is the one who could speak to the birds, tame the wolf, and understand in that beautiful environment of Assisi what was a living earth community. So that is very much at the heart of this encyclical in terms of a new worldview. Now, I'll just conclude here by saying the Pope brings in this Franciscan message, a deep sense of kinship, brother sun, sister moon in that canticle and so on. But he speaks of kinship with everything, that we are related. Genetically, we are related. Biologically, and so on, we are related. So there's a continuity of life he's bringing forward. And he talks about this as our patrimony, that which we are inheriting. So he calls us finally to an ecological conversion where this awakens in our souls, our spirits, our minds, and our bodies. And as you know well in your own spirituality and charisma, when that spirituality awakens, so does the action to come forward on ecological restoration, protection, on justice issues, and so on. So I will conclude with ecological conversion of consciousness, our mindset, and consciousness from our hearts, a new ecological eco-justice ethics. So thank you. I hope some of this was helpful, and I so look forward to your questions and comments and ongoing dialogue. Thank you. I'm happy to take a question.
Mary Evelyn, before we take questions, thank you so much for your presentation, for your words and motivation and enlivened spirit about all of this that I think just resonates even through the electronic means that we're talking. Yes, there are several coming in, and we thank you. We'll start with Suzanne, who asked, when spirituality awakens, so does action. That was one of your comments. Mary Evelyn, would you care to expand on that, particularly in the sign of our times?
Again, I think you as a religious community know very well that a spiritual basis, especially as it's deepened and broadened and grounded, can lead to fruitful action, can lead to not to despair or hopelessness or a sense of paralysis. And that's where Teilhard's zest for life is so extraordinary. He suffered enormously because his words and his books were not published in his lifetime and so on. And yet he persisted in this eco-spiritual sensibility that he developed within himself. And I really recommend, reading Divine Milieu and Hymn of the Universe, and even his letters to his Marguerite, Making of a Mind. That's what first brought me into Teilhard. The compassion for his sick cousin and so on. This is a mind of immense resources. So just in short, I think, as we practice our meditation and so on, we will find our way to action and hopefully will not lose hope and not lose a sense of possibility. I find this with young people, by the way. They are very determined not to give up hope. And that's what spirituality can do for all of us.
Thank you, Mary Evelyn. We also have another question, and that's about the destruction of the Brazilian rainforest and the connection that we're becoming aware of between the destruction of creation around us and the rise of disease and the pandemic. I'm wondering if you would comment on that.
Yes, we've been to the Amazon twice, and with one of the great scientist, Tom Lovejoy, who's been doing research there for 40 years. And the other time was with the Greek Orthodox patriarch, actually. And at that first time, I just want to reflect, he asked for forgiveness for forced conversion of indigenous peoples. And it was a very powerful ceremony, and the confluence of the two rivers of the Amazon. And this is what the Pope has also done down in Peru and Colombia, to ask for forgiveness for conversion. And as you know, I think the Pope had a huge synod in October on the Amazon, which was quite extraordinary. Now, that's not answering the question exactly, but that synod was very important. I'm also involved in the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative, which comes out of the UN, and Norwegian government is supporting it. What I'm trying to put into the hopeful sign is there's very strong attempts to support and activate the keepers of the rainforest, and that is indigenous peoples, respecting their culture and their religions, and trying to get Christian communities and others to support them. So those are two initiatives from the Amazon Synod and Interfaith Rainforest Initiative. Now, Bolsonaro, as you know, is talking horrible things about indigenous peoples throughout that region. And people are, calling it almost a genocide of his mentality. And there's many fundamentalist Christians who have no respect whatsoever for these indigenous peoples and their traditions. So I agree with, the thrust of the question. It's extremely worrisome. Tom Lovejoy would say we collectively, meaning many people around the world, have helped protect a great percentage still of the Amazon. But this is, it could be a tipping point. It's a very, very worrisome moment. But Bolsonaro is also getting pushback from his own government and from the UN. So thank you for the question. The connection to health and pandemics, it's all there in that region.
Well, following up on that, Mary Evelyn, several questions further along the pandemic line, recognizing that in some ways we see cleaner air, cleaner water, some hopeful signs. At the same time, we see governments who are pulling back environmental restrictions, anticipating a need to ramp up to get back to where we were consumer-wise and the rest. How are you seeing all this balance out? Do you think this experience that we're all going through is going to help us better embrace the new worldview, and have an ecological conversion, or otherwise?
Yeah. Well, that's, again, one of the central questions of our moment. Is very perceptive, very well said. I'm reading articles that are highlighting this. Are we just going to go back to mindless consumerism and consumption and inequities and so on? I can't predict, of course, but Barry used to say we have to lay down the foundation for a new ecological era. And that's what I feel we're all trying to do in our own ways, small as they all might be. I see our work just as an offering into a very complex suite of issues. But I do feel that one of the deep feelings is I feel a midwife to this work on bringing the religious communities in, bringing Journey of the Universe in, midwifing this at every step. I really want to say, I feel the universe has open doors. This connection to the United Nations Environment Program is another opening, much bigger than any of us. So I think if we can trust this thrust of the universe with its chaotic and creative processes, we will move forward certain ideas of green economy, green technology, and even more holistic science. It's breaking through. The younger generation wants it desperately. We know this from Sunrise Movement, Extinction Rebellion. They are not to be stopped. I see it in our students. So we have to trust this intergenerational change as well. They cannot wait to have their own time in the sun and their own creativity.
Thanks, Mary Evelyn. This is another question. It's a little bit of a composite, but the School Sisters of Notre Dame directional statement is entitled Love Gives Everything. And two of our questioners were asking a question, for example, could you, well, it's not a question, it's asking you for a comment on your reflections on Teilhard and Laudato Si' vision of love. Like, what would you say, a little bit about what the vision of love is encoded in both of them, and how might their vision of love help us to attend more deeply to the cry of the earth?
Mm-hmm. Oh, powerful question. So the vision of love from Teilhard is that love is throughout the whole universe, that everything is infused somehow. And this is what we're trying to say in Journey of the Universe, communion, coming together, that at each stage of these creative ecological processes, even galactic processes, more complex systems emerge. How? We don't know. But there's these inner forces that are moving from stars and galaxies to planetary systems and so on. So Teilhard had this sense, greater complexity, greater consciousness, and that in the human is expressed as deepening compassion, deepening love, comprehensive compassion. This is what Brian calls it, and so on. And I do think we are being broken open as almost never before in our lifetimes to this awful sense of suffering and unraveling and disintegration of these systems. But at the same time, we're seeing people rising to the occasion to take care of one another. I mean, I go into the grocery store and I'm practically weeping, thanking the people who are there, all these frontline people, the healthcare people, and so on. So there's this outpouring of compassion for people who are still trying to care and make these systems go forward. Love is all around us. And I know there's terrible stories too, and mean-spirited stories and so on. But the music, the people in Italy singing to one another, the pan beating in New York City, that is the spirit of love that will, I think, carry us forward. How many incredible, look at Andrea Bocelli at the Duomo in Milan singing on Easter Sunday, a blind person singing even outside the Duomo, Amazing Grace. For someone who's blind and now I see. I mean, that was the most watched YouTube ever. That is hope. That is love. That is compassion. Incredible. See it if you haven't. Inside Panis Angelicus and Ave Maria. Oh, it's incredible.
Well, thank you, Mary Evelyn. Your energy is so positive. I really appreciate that. One of the questions I've received via email talks about that their experience is that in terms of helping heal our common home, our Earth community, it seems to be women that tend to take a leadership role. And we were wondering if you would be willing to comment about that and then maybe transition to, do you see a particular role women religious have played or can play to move us further in this regard?
Of course, I'm glad you said that. I mean, women rule. Who runs the world? We know. And, I just want to take my hat off to the way your order and the orders across this country dealt with the examination from bishops and cardinals and so on that you had to endure with incredible grace, dignity, and fortitude. And you got a lot of feedback, I hope enough, from people who, just think you rock in the vernacular. But so I just want to say also that I think the nuns who have, and I'm not criticizing those who left for other reasons, but those of you who were able to stay and transform your own orders and institutions and continually grow and examine and discern, judge, see, act, and so on, it's incredible. And it's actually an example, I think, you see, of how institutions now more than ever have to build community and consensus, but movement forward. And you do that with integrity. I know there's disagreements. I know there's not all happiness and peace and love, but I'm just affirming that what you have done since post-Vatican II is remarkable. And so, I could talk forever on this women's issue. I mean, I've been in academia that has very little respect for women still. I was the first woman tenured at Bucknell in religious studies. There's no one, when I came to Yale 14 years ago, there were no women tenured at the School of the Environment. So believe me, it's something I share with you, I respect deeply. And we just have to go forward with fortitude, because why is it? And I said this to Arlene and Tim last week, the nuns got Thomas Berry better than almost any other group. And I truly hope with the incredibly wonderful videos that you've developed, just that one on cosmology is beautiful, that there will be a new birthing of understanding of cosmology and how it is coherent with our own tradition. And that's the next wave, I think, of what the sisters can contribute. So go for it. I see a question there that says, I deeply embrace the richness of what's offered in Laudato Si, but do you think the Vatican is overly timid regarding criticism of people who profit from the sale of fossil fuels? I want to say just two things to conclude that I think will be hopeful. And I'm not trying to be Pollyanna-ish about all this. The Vatican has its problems, as we know. But they had a huge meeting last year, bringing in high-level executives and fossil fuel people and bankers saying, we've got to stop this exploitation. So I wanted to respond to that. I don't think they're being too timid, especially the Pope. But I wanted to just say, I'm on this ecology working group at the Vatican now. It's just starting up to respond to some of these issues and through May and June. But in the last meeting last week, the high-level priest who's working this through the system said the Vatican has done a paper on economics and the Green New Deal, and they want to put forward a universal Green New Deal that brings together this ecology, justice, peace perspective that we've talked about. And they're going to call it a universal Green New Deal to take it out of the politics here. The Europeans are very much behind a Green New Deal. So I think this is, perhaps a breakthrough moment that if the Vatican supports this, it will be quite astonishing, I think. So I just wanted to put that forward, and we can pray for it to come forward. And back to you, Arlene. Thank you for letting me just interject that.
Oh, we're happy. We would love to have you go on and on. I'm thinking, just as we bring it to a conclusion, something that you started with, Mary Evelyn, when you're talking about this conversation that you had with your mom, wondering out loud about a papal encyclical, on the environment that would really have a chance to heal the earth. And I couldn't help but think maybe it's time for another conversation with your mom, wherever she is, about the Green New Deal. That perhaps that's going to be the next wonderful endeavor that will be engaged in, spearheaded by the Vatican. That will be just terrific. So I'm really sorry to have to bring this to a conclusion, but we must. But we hope that, we will continue, of course, our commitment, to extend right relationship with the earth and all beings, who compose this community of life. So just by way of conclusion, Mary Evelyn, great big thank you for being with us and for helping us to, recover our sense and nurture our sense of the holy within all of creation and within every being that has been created. Certainly the love that Teilhard talked about is permeating everything and everyone. And in a very special way, in addition to the power of your word tonight, we want to thank you for the power of your commitment to earth and to all beings that has been a beautiful golden thread, like through your life. And we know that it's weaving wonderful things in the world. And we want to encourage you to keep going. And you can be really believe that our prayers will be with you all the time. And we hope that this is not an ending, but a continuation of our relationship with you. And so until we see you again, be well. And good night, everyone.
Thank you so much. I just want to say the most important thing for John and me and Brian and our community are your prayers. I really mean that. And I feel many of the nuns have sustained this work, and we'd be delighted to be in touch with you going forward. Thank you, Arlene, and thank you, Tim, and all your community.
Thank you very much. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.